Hey everyone, it is Kim from It's Kim here again, back with another review video. Alright, so today I'm going to be talking about the SONY ZEISS BATIS 85mm F1.8 lens. So in the last video, I talked about the Sigma 85mm art lens and pretty much gave it like 5 stars. Really loved that lens. But as promised, I told you I would also be looking at the SONY ZEISS BATIS 85mm lens, which is the native 85mm lens for Sony E-mount cameras. So today I'll be talking about the same 5 topics that I addressed in the last review video: the focus, the aperture, the low light performance, the bokeh, and the weight. So let's start with the focus. I would say that was the most challenging part of working with this lens, unlike the Sigma lens, which I really had only 1 or 2 moments where that was an issue. With the Sony lens, it was sort of tricky to get the right focus, and I got a hang of it as I went along, but that has to do to me with the different structure that Sony lens has versus the Sigma. So with the Sigma lens, it was very sharp, very quick, very clean, very distinct bokeh, but with this lens, I found that it was a lot more soft, dreamy, and it caused that focus pull to be a lot slower and smoother. But when it found the subject, it held it pretty well. So it's just different styles. And I'll say explicitly here, like, this lens offered such a different look than the Sigma lens. Even though they were the same focal length, I found that this was the first time I would ever be able to justify owning 2 lenses at the same focal length, because they just did 2 different things. So the next thing I'll go into is the aperture. So the aperture for this lens is a little bit more than the Sigma. So this aperture is 1.8, whereas the Sigma is 1.4. I found that there were moments that I wanted just a little bit more. I wanted that aperture to drop down a little bit lower, especially when I was shooting in slow motion. So if you don't know, in order to shoot slow motion, you have to up your shutter speed to be double your frame rate. So if you're shooting at 60 frames per second, your shutter speed is at 120. If you're shooting at 120 frames per second, your shutter speed is at 240. So because I had to up that shutter speed, obviously with that comes a little bit less light. So those were the moments where I really wanted that extra boost in aperture. But honestly, shooting at 4K at 30 frames per second, I really had no issues with aperture. Now, there isn't really anything as no bokeh, right? Every time you get that blur or that light, or lens flare, or those kind of looks, that is bokeh happening. But this one, it wasn't as sharp as the Sigma. As I said, it's a lot more dreamy. It's kind of like a haze and a fog. So it's a very smooth look, and rather than everything being in bokeh before it comes into focus, it's just sort of like a smooth haze. But when you're working with light, or something's out of focus that's super lit, then you can see that sort of soft bokeh forming, but it's not going to be the same kind of bokeh performance that you get on the Sigma lens. And that's fine. As I said, like, these lenses have sort of different purposes for me, different sorts of looks. If I was doing something like a wedding or something more romantic, I would probably gravitate to this lens before I gravitate to the Sigma. And that brings me to the weight, and I'll talk about the weight because something like a wedding, something like an event, I'm just gonna be realistic. The fact that this Sigma lens is 5 pounds compared to the Sony, which is like, I think it was like 1.79, whereas the Sigma is 4.79. Like, so 3 pounds less makes a huge huge difference. Not once during shooting did I think about the weight. I was able to kind of maneuver in situations just as I do with my 16mm Sigma lens, which is about the same weight. It still has a 67mm thread, so I can use my ND filter on either of these pretty comfortably. Those are things that I kind of look at in terms of convenience for the lens. So I will definitely say the weight was a bonus. Even though in the Sigma review I said the weight can be a pro or con, after working with this, I was like, yeah, the fact that I didn't have to think about the weight once is definitely a plus. So that is something that I would say is really positive with this lens. It's very lightweight. You can use it in a multitude of situations and not really feel any sort of hindrance or need to rest your arm or anything like that. So yeah, again, thumbs up for the weight. So the last thing I'll mention here is the low light performance. I kind of addressed this earlier, but with the slow-mo is the only time you're really going to need maybe some compensation for low light. But honestly, 1.8 is still a really solid aperture, so your low light performance on this lens is going to be really good. There weren't really any moments where I was just like, this is super dark. But I think that if you have like a little pocket light or, something, even your phone, sometimes using your iPhone to just add a little extra light to a situation, it's not ideal. But yeah, if you're struggling with that, it's probably going to be when your shutter speed is higher because you're shooting slow motion. At 4K, 30 frames per second, your low light performance is going to be pretty good. All around, I give this lens a solid 4.5, which means here that the Sigma kind of won over the Sony. But if I'm being honest, I think both of these lenses are very, very strong lenses. There are two lenses that I would keep in my kit. I think they are really phenomenal and they kind of just serve two different purposes, even though they're the same focal length. And so if you're looking for something that's a little bit sharper and you can deal with the weight, I would go with the Sigma. But if you're looking for something that's a little bit more dreamy, a lot more lightweight and handles focus, you can deal with the slower focus, I would say the Sony is for you. But I would say overall, I would choose the Sigma over the Sony just for my needs. But they're both very solid lenses and both lenses that I would recommend. All right, you all, thanks for watching. Go ahead and subscribe, comment, like, all of those things, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.